Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regularly scheduled Goffstown Planning Board meeting. Normally, we begin with introductions, and we'll start with Dave Pearson.
Dave Pearson, alternate member.
Jim Ryman.
Barbara Griffin.
Karen Hughes.
Kimberly Peace.
Tim Redmond.
Gail LeBrecq, alternate and recording secretary.
Philip Devanza.
Carlos Adams, select board representative.
Joanne Duffy, Planning and Economic Development Director.
Okay, thank you. The first order of business is our minutes from our November 18th meeting. Is that correct, Joanne?
Yes, that's correct.
And were these sent to people, or were they emailed?
They were included in the packet,
Thank you.
or small envelope this time.
No, I almost missed it.
I thought I was being served.
By the town of Goffstown?
Okay. Jim?
On page 4, numbers 12 and 13 on the conditions. I'm not sure that's the correct wording. Review indetermination of plan does not exempt application.
Applicant.
Does not applicant. But what does that say? What does that mean?
You ought to ask somebody who knows, not me.
Well, I just question that wording.
We'll ask
It
Joanne
should
to
say
answer.
and, A-N-D, not in.
No, review indetermination, what does that mean?
I'm determined to review.
I think it should say review and determination.
What's a review and determination of a plan?
Well, that means that they're not exempt from any of those things listed after that.
So does it mean approval of a plan does not mean they're exempt? Is that what we're trying to say?
Exactly, they're not exempt.
Well, I guess I would take out the words then, review, and because those are kind of nonsensical. And say,
Determination.
approval, whatever Barbara said.
Yeah, review and determination should be
Stricken entirely. And
just approval, any approvals. Since that's standard
That should be
language,
a
and I don't
standard
understand why it flipped
Yeah.
in this one.
Usually it does say that, I believe.
I've never read those words before.
I know, no one pays attention to that. I'll check on the old ones.
Well, we know what we think it means. From now on, let's make it sound like what it means.
So you want it to say any application,
no.
no.
Any
Approval.
I'm sorry, approval of the plan does not exempt
Right.
blah, blah, blah.
So is that how the conditions were written, Joanne?
Yes.
And did you take the notes to write them? Or did you get them from our esteemed recorder?
Well, Patty takes from the minutes, she copies those and puts them onto the notice of decision.
Okay.
So we can correct that, that's not a problem.
Okay.
When I get them, I usually copy them
From the staff.
So since they are approved conditions, we can't change the wording, or if that's not how they were stated at the meeting, we need to make that determination, correct?
Well, I don't recall that's how they were stated, because we would have caught that. I can look. No, I don't have a list. I just don't remember ever seeing those words before.
I don't think it's not a substantive change. It's clarifying it, review.
Other than it's a condition of approval, I would hesitate to, on a voice vote here at a meeting tonight, to change the wording on a condition.
I guess, Tim, I suggest that somebody go back and look at the list on our write-up of what the conditions, because I think that would have jumped out at us, and see what the wording was, and it was just an error in transcription, and we can correct it.
Okay, I can take care of that.
And I think the wording
Dave wanted to
required,
be recognized?
I'm sorry.
Page 4 of 8, second line from the bottom. It's
I know what he's going for.
the Corps of Engineer, Corps is C-O-R-P-S.
Okay. It's just a spelling error.
Yeah.
So, should we not approve the minutes tonight until we have a determination on the wording? Would that be a fair statement?
I believe so.
I think we should get the wording squared away before we approve the minutes.
Because we did have a discussion of it, that subject. We did have a discussion of it.
If I could also add, it's also confusing, it says a couple of required approvals and permitting. I mean, that's a little confusing. I mean, what we're trying to say is you got to get all the other permits that are required. Right?
I think that's okay. Well, you're saying it's sort of redundant.
Well, or required approvals for permitting.
My guess is that maybe we've let this language slide for a while, and we need to
Yeah.
fix it.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
So does that change the condition of the approval conditions? It doesn't substantively change them, it just corrects the wording in them for the message we're trying to convey? All right, so I would say that we would ask Joanne to bring the revised wording to our next meeting, and we can discuss it, and we can amend the minutes at the next meeting, if that's agreeable with everybody. Okay, so we'll put these minutes off until our next meeting. Joanne, is there anything prior to beginning the proposed zoning amendments, public hearing?
No, there is nothing.
Okay. So, this hearing tonight is the 2022 proposed zoning amendments. It is our first public hearing. We all have copies of them in front of us. We've already read them ourselves. Do we have to have a reading of them, Joanne? For any legal reason?
It was advertised in the newspaper, and we've had copies on the counter. It was also on our website, so it's been out there for the
I'm
public
just
to
curious if we
review.
have to have a complete reading of all of them again. I don't see it necessary personally. Any member of this board have any questions or comments on the proposed zoning amendments?
I do. So on page 2, there looks to be a error. It says,
Where are you?
it's 5.24.2 definitions,
Yes,
Harrisville ordinance.
that needs to be changed to
Yeah.
Goffstown, but I don't think that is a major change, I think. that's-
No,
Yeah.
no, I just wanted to point it out.
No,
for
I'm
everybody.
just thinking about, because if we change anything, then we have to have a second hearing. So if everyone's good with that, okay.
So we should be using the word Goffstown instead of Harrisville in that sentence?
Yeah, we live in Goffstown, so I
Well,
should.
we talked about the Harrisville
Well, we use it.
amendment, so I didn't know if it was,
Oh,
Yeah, that's where it came from.
that's where the word
Oh.
Harrisville came from. We're using that as a model.
a model, okay,
We
gotcha.
looked at a couple from different towns.
Harrisville, Pennsylvania.
Jim, how do you want to do this? Do you want to go through them and then we'll comment when we get to them? Or are you soliciting comments on this before you open the
I
public
wanted to
hearing?
know if any of the members of this board had any comments or questions prior to the public hearing.
Okay, I have one then.
Okay, then you can go ahead.
If you look on page 3, section 5.24. Let me precede this. When we we decided that we were going to use the Harrisville model, we didn't go through it in line-by-line detail. So this is really our first go-through with the filled in. We asked Joanne to fill it in, she did. So some of these comments are in that nature, but 5.24.4.1 is a decommissioning. The owner shall provide a bond, blah, blah, blah. But then you look at 5.24.5.6, in any commercial system, a performance guarantee may be required. And somewhere else, we have also a may be required. So are we, 5.24.4.1 is mandatory. 5.24.5.6 is discretionary on our part. So which is it? That's inconsistent.
And I think it should be mandatory for the commercial system.
Is it, or is it, could we foresee a mandatory commercial that's sufficiently small and we wouldn't? 'Cause it's, the problem with a bond is, what's the lifespan of these, 25 years? I mean, it's a long time to hold a bond, so.
Well, is the first one you mentioned, is that for private residence, or is that also for commercial? Or both?
Well, no,
4.1.
I think that's both, isn't it? Because each collector,
Right. I
it's
assumed it
pretty.
was both.
Yeah, so do I need a bond for the one on my garage roof?
So it sounds like point 6 is redundant because it's already stated in point 1.
That's
No,
what-
No.
I think the difference is, I think what 52441, because when you're talking about an owner, you're talking about probably a private owner or smaller operation. Maybe what we should say, and we'll hear public comment on it, the owner may be required to provide a bond, whereas when it's a commercial operation, it's required.
So changing 5.24.56 to make it mandatory?
Well, you're right.
Okay.
Right.
Well, let's,
I think maybe that's the way it should be, but, we can tier comment and discuss it.
Yeah, because the alternative is we can require it, but we don't have to.
well, my question is, why would we require someone to take something down if it's on their private property if they're not using it?
Private property gets foreclosed on, abandoned, just like other property. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, we just had a request recently for Goffstown Hardware to add the solar panels to the roof. And they came in prior to this being posted, so it doesn't apply. However, if someone were to do that in a commercial operation, would you really make them post a bond because they're putting it on their building itself? Or are you looking more for the ground-mounted, to protect the ground-mounted from being removed in a timely fashion?
Jim?
We talked about this in context of the towers, cell towers, but those are because they're a hazard when they're abandoned.
Yeah.
right.
A solar doesn't present the same safety hazards. That's the driving factor. It's an environmental issue. It's a site issue, but so is an abandoned warehouse. So we require any commercial building that has a expected lifespan to have a bond, a removal bond. Why would this be treated differently? I'm looking to Collis when you say this.
I would say that a solar panel farm is a safety factor if security is not provided and people are tampering with the wires and other infrastructure.
It's different than any other commercial
Well,
structure.
I believe the solar panels themselves create disposal issues due to the content of the solar panels. So I think that, we'll hear public comment, but maybe what we're talking about is an owner may be required to provide a bond, and that for a commercial system like the one we have off of 114 now, a commercial, because that's clearly a commercial operation as compared to a home operation. That's not hard to figure out. And we just went through that in our definition, taking it all out, right? That's what I thought of when you brought it up. Maybe we're talking about non-roof mounted, so that, because the roof mounted then becomes part of the building and the insurance and safety issue as compared to a separate freestanding commercial operation, so that if a Ace Hardware comes in and wants to put it on their roof, that's really a different potential long-term disposal issue than when it's freestanding on a lot out back.
So are we assuming that all roof mounting systems mount flush to the roof and they're not on frames or brackets that raises them up or creates an angle? I don't know. I don't know that enough about solar systems. Maybe we need to get some guidance from...
Sorry, Jim.
Jim, go ahead.
Well, all these are arguments for not making this mandatory as a zoning matter, but rather leave it to us in our site plan, because then we can look at each site and assess what the harm is. But to have a one-size-fits-all rule that is pretty onerous over the lifespan of a project, I'm hesitant if we want to promote this.
Karen?
I was just going to say, in terms of the situation that Collis raised, the difference there would be what Barbara was saying, is that the insurance would cover that for that property because it becomes part of the building. So even if it is attached to the building and it's raised in some sort of fashion, it's still part of the building.
My concern is with the word "may be required," because if you're going to have that leverage as a board, you're going to be accused of unfairly applying the bond to one applicant, and then another one comes in and says, well, that one didn't have to pay a bond, why should I have to pay a bond? And you're gonna have to come up with answers. So we have to have one or the other. It has to be in or out, as far as I'm concerned, not a discretionary decision of the board.
I respectfully disagree, because
Okay.
we do that in our site plan review all the time, and make decisions about what's required. That's
Yeah,
the
but
purpose of this board.
requiring a bond in those cases?
No, requiring other things.
That's a financial burden.
Yeah, but so is anything you require. You gotta put up more trees, that's a financial burden. So I think it's a matter of degree maybe, but I don't mind having some discretion. We could put some guidelines in.
Well, maybe the issue is to make it mandatory, and
Have a waiver.
and then it's a waiver.
Yeah.
You apply for a waiver.
Mhm.
But that
And
would,
it's not coming before this board. The issue, I think, is a commercial system is coming before this board. The owner of a private property is probably not coming before this board.
It's a building
So
department.
it's a building department.
but if you put it in the zoning ordinance, it would need a variance, not a waiver.
Okay,
So that would be zoning.
yeah, all right.
Bill?
Just a clarification on location of the panels on a residence. Some residents, because of the pitch of the roof and the way it faces, and where the connection has to go to the meter, doesn't make it possible to put them on the roof, and they have to then put them on the ground. So a residential solar system is not always on the roof.
No, I know that. We've got some in town that are on the ground.
Well, I was just bringing that up. It's the pitch of the roof, the way, where it faces, the angles that it faces, and it's also the distance from them that you have to go to where the hookup is to the service.
But I think that goes to the point that it should be in front of this board, because then it's a structure that you're talking about that needs to be dealt with.
I was just trying to
No, I
clarify.
understand. I think we understand how to, yeah,
Jim?
No, let
especially
Carlos-
the older houses.
Carlos had his hand up.
Tim, I like
Sorry.
Barbara's concept where it's required. If you don't think because of special circumstances that apply specifically to your property, you request a waiver, you seek a waiver. And justify why the waiver should be granted and be appropriate.
For the residential use.
Hey,
Yeah.
So we're gonna ask people who wanna put residential solar panels on their home to come before the planning board?
well, I think we can adopt the non-roof mounted.
I think we're creating a burden for something that the United States of America really wants, solar power. Half the country wants it, and we're gonna stand here and we're gonna tell people they have to come before us to ask whether we have to give them a bond or not. I think we're being overly burdensome. Jim, you're next.
Well, if we want to require it, but be able to waive it, as Joanne said, we don't have the power to waive zoning.
Right.
But if you put some provisions in our site plan regs on commercial, you'd have this and then have a site plan chapter, just like we do on other stuff, and have the waiver provision there. The standard can be you have to have it, but we can waive it in our discretion, then you've created that. But if you say it here, we don't have that waiver power, and I don't like it. That's a one-size-fits-all rule that may not apply.
Karen, I think
Yeah.
you're next.
I was going to echo what you were saying in terms of for residential use. I don't think we should be dissuading individuals from putting on solar panels, which is great for the environment, to
We don't
dissuade.
know.
Well, sure, right. Well, I do.
I don't.
It dissuade them from getting solar panels.
Bill?
There's one other thing that I noticed, and maybe it's someplace in here, I thought it was discussed, but apparently not, where it talks about the 5.24.5.1, all installations, regardless of type and location, require a building permit and electrical inspection. One other thing that several of the installers that are approved by the state, or there's not necessarily an approval process by the state, but that have done seminars on them, talk about structural engineer, the structural integrity, especially older homes, They're designed for a snow load on the roof, and now when you add the panels, they had the exact weight per square foot plus the type of insulation that they have, that it adds to the roof. And then when you get the snow load, you have to, they will not install them without a structural engineer approving of it, that it can take the load. So I don't know if that's something that you should consider.
Nope, I think that's on the homeowner.
I do,
I don't think we should be,
Yeah, that-
I think we're getting way into
That would
deep.
really be placing a burden on them too, because those structural engineers don't come cheap.
No.
Well,
But Phil's right, I mean, they did that when they did ours, but it wasn't a stamp report, so it wasn't as expensive. Once you have to submit something to us, it's,
All they're doing is looking to dump the blame on you if your roof collapses. End of story.
Well,
they told me I had to stop hanging my bicycles from the girders, and it's
Your bicycles weigh 8 pounds.
Christmas
Like it
lights,
sounds
Christmas
like
lights.
just because I have 16 bicycles, I don't know what your problem is.
Yeah.
Too many Christmas lights on the
Next to the
roof.
skull boats or whatever they are, and the oars and all that.
Structural engineer.
Wow.
So,
Are you still
we're sort of bouncing around here with what we're talking about.
Otherwise, I would.
I, for one, think that we should not require any residential application to have anything to do with the planning board. The building department is in charge of that. Let the building department handle it and leave us out of it. If it's a commercial application and it's going to be a new site with a commercial application, I think that's when the planning board should look at it. So that's just my opinion.
Okay.
So those are the questions we're going to bring up. We're going to talk about them more. Any other discussion items before we open up the public hearing? You can always come back to them. Everybody good? Seeing nobody objecting at this time, we will open the public hearing. 7:25. So if anybody wishes to speak on the topic of the 2022 zoning amendments, step up to the table and identify yourself.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Alan Yates, and I live at 82 Hillcrest Road, Goffstown. And I have just one particular question. I'm here as a independent citizen and not as a member of the zoning board. When I look at this thing about 5.24,
What page you on, Alan?
page 2.
Page 2. 524, okay.
Make a very good statement, is to encourage any efficient patterns of development. Now we're going to regulate the living bejesus out of it. Okay? 524-2-4 says that you're going to now delegate to a special exception.
522, Alan?
Yeah,
it's on page
point 2.4,
What page are we on?
3.
page 3.
524.
Ground-mounted
524.
systems may not cover more except by special exception. Oh my. So if I want to put a
Alan, which
ground-mounted...
section are you on?
Alan, I don't know what section you're on.
You said 522. We're in 522.
524-2-4. Excuse me, I misspoke.
Accessory solar system?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it covers everything, residential, non-residential, or agricultural on-site power generation. My goodness. Except by special exception. Now, here's the reason I'm asking. I'm working on a project very near the town hall here that has a flat roof on it, has over 1,000 square feet of solar on it. You're gonna tell me I'm gonna have to come to the board here to get a special exception to put solar on the roof?
This is
This is
the
for zoning.
ground.
This is not planning.
This is
Yeah, but-
1,000 square feet of ground,
Yeah.
not roof.
I'll have over 1,000 square feet of solar on the roof.
This is on the ground,
But
Alan.
this is for the ground.
Well, what if I put it on the ground?
Well, then you said it's going on the roof.
But it says right there, any ground or roof-mounted system intended primarily for residential, non-residential, agricultural.
But then it goes on to say, a ground-mounted system may not cover more than 1,000 square feet of ground. It's stating how much land you can use, basically.
It says any, the beginning of the sentence is any.
Is this part of the Harrisville model, Joanne?
No, but this is this is the definition section.
Right.
So we're talking about what is an accessory solar system. It's something, it defines what it's intended for. If it's a ground-mounted system, it can't be more than 1,000 square feet.
And then-
It's
and then
defining it as if it's an accessory,
And where
as
does-
compared to a commercial operation, which is
Who's going to
what-
grant the special exception, Barbara? The zoning board of adjustment?
Yes.
Who grants special exceptions? The ZBA.
Okay. I want to make sure I got it right. Jim?
Well, there's a few questions here. One, I don't like, a definition should just define. If you want requirements, put it somewhere else. You heard that. So it's a ground or roof mounted system intended primarily for residential, non-residential, or on-site power generation.
That's where it should end.
Okay.
Yeah.
It then, a question if it covers not more than 1,000 feet of ground except by special exception. So does this mean anything less than 1,000 is an accessory, or it doesn't have a size limitation on what's an accessory solar system? I'm treating it as a solar system can be any number of sizes, but somewhere we want to say not in the definitions that if it's over 1,000 square feet, you need some further approval, right? But that's not a definition, that's a performance standard.
So where does all the rest of that language belong?
Well, somewhere down below, you've got in general standards, maybe.
That should be broken into two sections, would you say?
Yeah, you put in standards, but don't mix up definitions with other requirements. Definition defines.
So it should end at the word generation after the first long run-on sentence?
Yeah.
No,
Yes?
Or-
It should just contain the first sentence.
The last sentence is a definition sentence. Is it? That's how I read it.
So you want to remove the ground-mounted system being more than 1,000 square feet except by special exception from that,
From the definition.
from the definition, and move that down to this general standards?
I guess, somewhere, I think of what approvals we require.
Well,
And I'm not sure it should be a special exception or a conditional use permit that's before us instead of the ZBA. Just like we do with the with the wetland out of 50 feet.
Do we know if a 1,000 square foot solar system is considered a large
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask,
system?
too.
Is that it's not considered large? Bill?
Yeah, well, I have a question.
Well,
That
let's-
is- Well, you triggered it. These systems, a ground-mounted system may not cover more than 1,000 square feet of ground, except by special exception. Now, are we talking about the coverage of the ground? What about the height? I'm just asking, because
that's,
I can see what's going to happen.
Next one, I'll know.
You have that 1,000, somebody will come in and use 995, but they'll use some kind of a thing that elevates it up so you got two different layers.
Yeah.
But you're meeting the definition.
The ground requirement,
Correct.
not the solar panel
Because
configuration.
that's what I was wondering, if we were measuring the solar panel, the side, the solar panels,
Yeah,
or the ground, and
that
it's
they're mounted on.
correct.
The more we did, who had their hand up?
I
Robert.
didn't know.
I don't think that's confusing at all. If it's a ground-mounted system, it's covering a certain area, and you measure it on the ground. It's from one corner to the other, to the other, to the other. If we're trying to define what an accessory solar system is. So And that makes sense, because any non-commercial ground or roof-mounted system intended for residential, non-residential, or agricultural on-site power generation. That's what we're talking about, right? Non-commercial for on-site power generation, not primarily, that's what it's for. Then we don't have to get into the sale, because when you generate the electricity for yourself, there is a sellback that goes to the utility company. You can't start to get into that. And then an accessory ground-mounted system shall not cover more than 1,000 square feet of ground. So that tells you, okay, if it's more than 1,000 square feet in its ground, we're sort of having a presumption that it's commercial and it's not an accessory system anymore, and you can apply for whatever you need to do, depending on where in the ordinance you're talking about. I mean, I don't, and I understand you're talking about the last sentence being appropriately a definition, but I think we just went through definitions last week when we started talking about commercial and taking money in, and how are we going to deal with that? So anyways, that would be my comment on it. And I think it deals with Alan's comment about except by special exception. It's if it's less than 1,000 square feet, it's presumed it can be an accessory, and if it's more than 1,000, it's presumed you're doing it for something else.
No?
Probably the easiest thing to do would be to delete the requirement for a special exception. Just take that
That
two
phrase.
words right out of it.
Yeah, that's what I've done, yeah. Okay, yeah, I agree.
So that there's no conditions. You can get a variance on anything. You can
Right.
apply for that. So anything in here. So when you say special exception, that's a whole different criteria for
So you wanna do-
evaluation too.
You're suggesting deleting except by special exception?
Yes.
Are you still looking at moving this down to general standards, that section?
Just the ground-mounted systems
I guess-
size must be moved to standards. It's not a definition.
Okay. And then are you looking at eliminating about the sale of electricity to others? As Barbara mentions.
Well, that's part of the definition. The last long sentence is all definition. It's not
Keep
a
that in
standard.
definition, okay.
What is the typical,
I don't know. I was trying to get that answer, and we kind of got around that one.
yeah?
Alan was going to try to answer it, but he didn't. Do you have any opinion on what a residential solar array is in terms of square footage? Is it greater than 1,000 square feet? I mean, if it was 20 by 50 on your roof, that would be big, wouldn't it?
We have lots that aren't.
We have lots of roofs that are more than 50 by 20.
More than
Oh, yeah?
50 by 20?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. My house.
Okay, so 1,000 square feet being on the ground is what it's really about, not being on the house.
Think about lots in the, off of 114A, 100 by 100. We got lots of them.
That's 10,000.
Oh, 100 by 10. Yeah, you're right, sorry. My math is off tonight. Thank you.
That's okay.
I flunked it.
I just caught it real quick. Anyway,
As far as the, I'm sorry.
Jim is trying to be recognized. Jim, you're next.
Well, let Collis go. He's one.
Collis, you're up.
Well, what I'm struggling with is, so this is whether it's commercial or not residential or commercial. Right? Did I see that right? So the problem that you deal with from an engineering perspective is when you get the big solar arrays, okay, it's the amount of water that runs off as opposed to that gets infiltrated into the ground. When it reaches a certain size, then you get a whole different host of problems you have to deal with, hydrologically speaking. Where does the water go to? What do you do with it? How do you handle it? Just like building a gigantic parking lot. You require drainage analysis and drainage studies. Where does the water go? How's it conveyed? How's it handled? How's it discharged? And to where? The same thing happens with big commercial solar arrays. And I know the state struggles with this a lot because you see some gigantic ones in certain parts of the state, and it's a real issue. Where does all that water go, number one? And number two, you've robbed all of that hydrology from the ground below where the solar panels are. So you're changing the hydrologic characteristics of the landscape.
Even if it's dripping onto the grass in front of the
Well,
panel?
it drips in a very narrow area though, as
But it
opposed,
still recharges the groundwater
as
to some
opposed to
degree,
rain
right?
being dispersed over a large area. It's now concentrated in one spot.
Okay. Jim?
Let me throw a stone. Do we know enough to do this yet?
Yes.
I'm not sure we do.
We're all arguing over it, so I guess we don't really
I
know.
mean, I'm
We're
not.
discussing it, I should say. I stand corrected.
Supported initially, but I don't want to be making arbitrary decisions when we don't have a lot of guidance on what the right answer should be, other than
What would your suggestion be then?
you can defer it. Wait till, we looked at two ordinances, two models.
We could pare it down and then add to it after we get information at a subsequent.
Yeah, our
Town
goal
meeting.
with the Harrisville model is it's a minimalist model,
Yeah.
and maybe we pare it down a little more.
Right, and then-
Both do it, because we, as Colin said, and others have said, there's some reason to have some standards on two of the big ones. But are we ready to do that?
I have some generic information.
Please.
So 10 kilowatts is about 660 square feet of roof space. So just randomly Googling one article, I have no idea what this refers to, but this is just giving us a ballpark of, typically they're saying, 1 kilowatt is about 66 square feet. You can get 10 kilowatt system for most residential houses for about 660 square feet of roof space. So 1,000 square feet then is a little bit bigger. And maybe that's where they just kind of arbitrarily chose that number, but it's, right, so you can get under 1,000 square feet per house, for a typical residential house. Anything over that, I think, like you said, Barbara, I think we're tripping into more than that, selling it back, that sort of thing, so.
Or a big
Oh, yeah, that's true, a bigger house.
And this is strictly, they're talking about the ground, so I think basically they don't want to take up a lot of, having people take up a lot of yard space with solar arrays. They could be, everywhere if people
Well, you
want
have
to do
limited
that.
roof space, but you have, a lot of people have unlimited yard space. So if you're
Right.
trying to control solar panel growth in the yard area.
Why do we care?
Whereas the roof is, as long as
You would
big
care
as your
maybe
roof
if you lived
is, you
next door
can
and
do
the
it.
sun was reflecting off it and burning
Yeah,
holes in
I
it.
want to speak up on that one. We have all sorts of rules about landscaping and screening, and you can't put structures up so close to the boundary of the property. So when you say, what do we care? These things, depending on where they're angled on property in your neighborhood, can be quite obtrusive to you during the day, just from the reflection and whatever else, and depending on how many panels you have. So, I think if you're going to take that attitude, you can take the attitude that you can put up an accessory building of up to 1,000 square feet and not get a permit for it.
There is one number. What's the number?
200.
200. I knew there's a number in there for that.
Now, this would need to follow the building code as far as, and it would also need to follow setbacks because they are considered
Right.
structures. However, the roof models would not need to follow the setbacks because they're already on the structure itself.
Alan?
Did any of you read the provisions in our building code that is adopted in town by the state that refers to solar? Did anybody read it?
No, I didn't read it.
I did look at it.
Did anyone look at it?
I did.
Well, maybe you should before you take and write regulation. Because I think this is not a bad idea. I think it's poorly written. And I don't think it, given the questions, now, I have one here about abandonment and discontinuance. Okay, so we're gonna become the police? We have a vehicle to do that now. The building department. Anybody can file a complaint about something either abandoned, not being used, or whatever. We already have that ability in town ordinances to do that. So why do we have to do it again?
I think this was more referring to, large commercial projects.
Well, you have a large commercial project here in town. What problems did you have with it? You had to go through the approval process, so what problems did you have with that?
The Bedford residents didn't want it.
Drainage.
Well, no, what did the town residents have? That's,
But that's a different situation because of its unique topography, and we have to be open for the fact that, what if instead of building like the car wash across from Wicked, they fill that whole field with solar panels? Very different situation. See it as right off 114 as we drive by it every day, or whatever that road is, Mass Road. So it's, we're trying to adopt standards for any location in town. And I kind of agree with Jim. I feel like maybe we're too preliminary on this.
Tim?
Jim, please, sorry, I'm looking at something.
Back to my site plan regulation suggestion. We can put stuff in our site plan regs and modify them easily if you're concerned about the commercial stuff. We don't, I mean, we have arrows in our quiver that aren't zoning, we have planning ones that would address concerns like that you said, or drainage or collises. And I wonder, until we have a better model or know more, if that's the way to do it, instead of trying to put a zoning ordinance in. I'm mindful of Barbara's concerns, but for the large projects, our site plan review would address that glare and things just like they do in other uses. What it doesn't deal with, though, are the residential uses, because they don't come before us. So if that's a concern, we should do it through zoning. I just don't know if we're ready to do it now. Here we are, just not sure.
Alan?
You may be concerned with some of the residential that are on tripods in the backyard to track the sun. They move. There's several of them in my neighborhood, and they're huge. I mean, they're probably 20 by 20. Each one of them. There's 2 of them. And they track.
Good day's GPS.
But why, the question is, why did he do it? It's because he has an electrically heated house. So there is a demand for bigger systems if you have electric heat in your house.
And he has 4 Teslas.
Huh?
He has 4 Teslas.
Yeah. But it's a touchy subject. I was concerned about the approval process for the big farm that we have here in town, and I wondered what kind of problems you had that may have.
We haven't had any problems
Yeah,
that I
actually
know of at
not.
this point.
That I know of.
That I know. I don't, maybe some other problems have arisen, but I don't. Barbara, did you have something?
Yes, and, problems that we've had, I have to tell you, I thought that project was one of the better applicants we have ever had. They were incredibly, it took a very long time to get that project through, and some of that was because the state, they were waiting for the laws to kick in to make it profitable. I mean, we all know that's what part of what was going on. But they were probably one of the most responsive commercial applicants. They came back, they tried to address things. I thought, first of all, that was a pretty impressive application, but the question is not today, because if you get into it, the question is tomorrow. The question is the tower that falls down after the owner decides not to use it anymore. And on a lot like that in particular, and I don't know the details of it, but I can imagine that buying granite under a power line was probably not that big of an investment. The investment was, I'm sure, the capital put into the solar array, not the land purchase, as compared to buying the nice farmland on the top of the hill, right? I mean, it was, nobody knew what to do with that property, and a solar array sort of worked for it.
So that property is actually a rental. They're leasing the land.
Right, which raises the concern even more about if the lessor, who's the one doing the project, right? Because remember, we had things where the owner had to be contacted because the applicant was really the people looking to lease it. When they have made their money, they're gone. And you've got an owner with a solar array on property that there is probably not a lot of interest from an owner standpoint in cleaning up, because what else are you going to do with granite, a rock pile of granite under power lines? And as a community, we're now going to have solar panels that aren't in use anymore. There's a tower, it's actually over on the Bedford line, that's collapsed. That, it's my understanding, is still collapsed over there up behind Magnolia. If you go on the power lines that head over, there's a tower and some other stuff just down.
From this project?
No, from another project, but I'm
okay.
sorry, I switched to, this is why we started this for towers, is because eventually people walk away and they're just there. So, I mean, I appreciate that maybe you know, we need to sort of modify this a little bit, but I still think that's the issue. It's not the approval of it and getting it in, it's the concern that the town is gonna be on the hook, I suspect, in the future for that project, just because of those things. And we have neighborhoods where they're popping up, and I do know of people who have panels on a budding property that they consider to be really obtrusive.
Jim?
I would propose that we take the ground-mounted system covering more than 1,000 square feet, put it down below. I would not make it a special exception. I would keep it in our jurisdiction as a, say, make it a conditional use permit, because we're used to planning issues, and it's really more of a planning than a zoning, and then Alan can't complain, it's coming before his board.
Do you want to add it to a specific one so you can make it clear where you want it?
Like in section 5.24.5, I would take out 5.24.4.1 as mandatory, and I would say on 25.24.5.6, on any commercial system or any ground mounted system more than 1,000 feet, we may require a performance guarantee, because that's the large tower.
You leaving the word "may" in there?
I'm leaving it may, because they have to
Right.
come before us anyway for site plan or conditional use approval.
Can you say that again, may require?
No, I can't. I can always say things
Just
once.
the last part, may require.
Any commercial system or any ground-mounted system more than 1,000 square feet.
Oh, okay.
Greater than 1,000 square feet.
May
Yes.
require
To
cover.
Yeah, or the,
Okay.
yeah. And then we can think about how we get there. We can get some regs that cover the process.
And what section did you want to move the statement about the ground-mounted system?
I would put it down in the general standards, because that's, I don't know where else to put it.
But you have to pick a section to add it to. That's
Yeah,
what
just
I meant.
add, just stick
A
one
new
in.
section.
Yeah, we can
Right.
just make a new
Yeah.
number. You've
Yeah.
got ground mounted.
Well, you can do it, look at 5.24.5.3, all ground-mounted systems shall be reasonably screened. I don't know how you determine that. Who determines reasonableness? You can't have a standard with no enforcement. So what does that mean? But then you'd stick it in following that. If you're gonna say things about screening and all, you gotta have somebody looking at it and approving it. And I don't know, we're not gonna do that on residential. Or maybe we do. All ground-mounted systems have to come before us for conditional use permit.
Well, more than 1,000.
No, but you say, all ground-mounted systems shall be reasonably screened. Who determines that?
Gotcha.
Yeah,
If
what's
they have
the
to come
standard?
before us, we can't. Just like on, out of 50 feet, we put in standards. So that would be reasonable. I don't know.
So you're proposing,
So how many ground-mounted systems do you think we have here in town?
4.
I have no idea. There's one in my neighborhood,
I made that number up, I don't know.
so
Yeah, but it sounded good.
but few.
Yeah.
I don't think it's many.
Jim, do you propose the statement regarding reasonably screening from a budding property? You suppose that should be removed?
Well, the question, who enforces? Who
Well-
determines?
Wouldn't it be,
We need to take action on the statement tonight, rather than just let it go through and become problematic.
Well, at least it says that there has to be some screening versus nothing at all.
But who decides what's reasonable?
So if someone installs one and the neighbor complains, the code enforcement person could
Well, then,
kind of
Couldn't we
get
leave it
involved.
up?
I would put that shall be, it has to be a performance standard that
Right.
will not glare,
Yeah.
just like we do on our lighting. So you put in will not cause glare on surrounding
Abutting
properties. That I can live with.
could you make a statement that says something to the effect as shall be reasonably screened and approved by the planning board, or something to
But
that
it has to be a
effect?
procedure to come before us, and
Because
unless,
then we can make the determination on the standard.
well, and the way to do that then is for any ground-mounted system has to come before us for a conditional use permit. Because it's not a site plan issue, it's not a commercial use.
but if we could say that for all ground-mounted systems?
Well,
Some are gonna be, some are gonna walk in and get their permit and walk out in 5 minutes, and some may be problematic that we have to deal with, so there's no quick answer to
Well, you
that.
could do that. If you want control and ground-mounted systems, that's the best way of doing it. You can have zoning standards, but you can't have a lot of discretion in them because somebody has to enforce it. What is reasonable screening? I don't know.
Even our reasonable screening doesn't work in a lot of cases. Go out to the gas station at the end of the Goffstown back road and see how tall the 24-inch plants
Yeah, I
are that are
know.
supposed to screen the headlights from the people across the street 5 years ago. Every time I look at it, I get sick to my stomach.
Which one is this?
The gas station at the end of Goffstown back road, right to Manchester line. We talked about screening those people from headlight wash from the island.
We got told by engineers it wasn't going to be an issue. It was ridiculous.
Well, then we didn't set a tough enough standard.
No, I know we didn't.
It's our fault for not making them put a wall up like they did at the Cumberland Farms or something. Okay, so Jim, are we going to amend the reasonably screened statement so that it has a standard that we're going to apply as a planning board?
I'm not sure I want to see every ground-mounted system, but before, I would leave that in our conditional use permits for big ones, over 1,000, because they're going to come
Okay.
over. Don't worry about the little ones, but have in this as a zoning standard, they cannot cause glare on surrounding properties,
Yeah.
because that's enforceable as a zoning matter.
Al?
Remember, screening becomes a problem for solar.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
right.
gotta plant trees
Well,
in
it
front of
can,
you.
it doesn't have to.
It doesn't necessarily have to,
It
Al.
can, but it doesn't have to.
Well, you know, I've seen worse things happen.
Arborvitae.
Well, no, Alan has a point.
He does have a point, but you
Some
know,
people have to cut the trees down in order to put the...
Talking about.
yeah, but screening is generally a height thing, not
Yeah,
a towering.
huge
You know, a
subsidies. to
40-foot
everybody
tree is
building
not
on
screening.
Well, think about the low angle of the sun right now. Most of those automatic systems, the system is almost vertical right now.
Right.
Because it's the short end of the year, just to catch the sun. So my neighbors are 22, 24 feet high. I don't begrudge him for having them, because he probably didn't think about it, but they're there. Do I worry about it every day? No. I drive by it every day.
Do you get glare?
Huh?
Do you get
Not when
glare?
it's at 24 feet.
And you don't get any glare from it.
Probably.
And you wouldn't, even in the summer altitude, you won't get glare from a solar panel because it doesn't, you have to be in the right geometry for refractory to even have it hit you.
Until that one person comes in whose house is geometrically properly located to get it right through the kitchen.
I still remember the lights from the house that went up for the lights from the baseball field when the
Right.
Little League fields went in. That was a big issue.
Okay. So what are we doing with this thing? Are we gonna scrap the whole thing till next year, or are we gonna make some amendments and leave it in?
Well, as a citizen, I think it's a good idea. But I think you're premature and it's misworded and miswritten. Because what are your goals? You need to write what your goals are first before you write the ordinance. What are your goals? I don't see this here. What are the goals of the planning board by writing this ordinance?
That would be found in a purpose statement.
Only a shake can write things that are perfect.
If I were you on that note, I would rewrite the purpose so it doesn't state a philosophy of fuel use anymore. I don't think that's appropriate in a zoning ordinance. I don't think it's necessary. We're just allowing a use that which there's a demand, and the fact that it decreases dependence on fossil fuels and
I don't think that should be in
I
there.
don't think that should be, and Harrisville's a different town than us. And Harrisville's an appropriate statement, but I just don't think you need to say that. I think you need to say, are we encouraging your use? Yes, that's all you have to say, period. Don't get carried away. We're not preaching, we're just allowing.
We could preach.
We shouldn't.
Some people would say we are preaching.
No. Yeah. But we're a public body representing the town as a whole.
Yeah,
I
no,
have
I'm
my own
joking.
views, I'm in favor of these, but I don't think we should.
So board members, are we looking at some sort of impending doom if we were to put it off for a year and get it right? Or are we looking at
Well,
a problem that's coming up and now we're trying to get ahead of the curve? Barbara?
I would like to try to get ahead of the curve, especially since we are looking at contracting out to have our development regs and zoning ordinance redone, right, Joanne? Because I think if we put this in there, I think it's important for the town. I think the purpose of this is, you know, we want to allow this to occur while providing reasonable protection for abutters and the community in the case decommissioning is necessary. And I think that's a valid zoning purpose, and I think we can tone it down. I'm gonna be around for a few days. Maybe we've talked about the areas that I think are problematic. I am willing to come in and talk to Joanne about working on the sections and toning it down, because that's really the purpose. I mean, at least initially, is to allow us to sort of be able to provide for that issue. And I think maybe some of the other issues in regards to screening at 24 feet need a little more refinement, but I think it's important to get something in.
I agree. Let's see if we can tighten it and make it work.
Right, just tighten it to what we're talking
I'm
about.
assuming we don't have anything in the regs.
Correct.
Currently, okay. Yeah, then I would agree too.
Just take 524.4.1. Now, that means that you gave the Public Works Director another job.
I might take it away.
We can make them do something.
No, but the thing is, it might be all right to say, do a bond, but don't throw it at the Public Works
Yeah,
Director.
That should be,
An amount
that should be
determined.
by us,
Right.
and then they make a recommendation. That's our usual process.
Yeah.
I agree. You can't delegate to some
Right.
So that has to be, that paragraph needs to be adjusted, Barbara.
Yeah, because they're coming before us on a site plan anyway, so it'd just be like we do on all other bonds.
David?
Yeah, determined by the planning board and then put.
I'm going to address the purpose statement there. on page 2, because of comments we just made about taking out the energy efficient development. But that could read, the purpose of the section acknowledges increasing installation of solar panels will occur. Then you go on to say that therefore it's appropriate to do the following actions: protecting health, safety, welfare.
Well, the last sentence here could be totally written out.
Why?
Consideration of the town's scenic views, historic properties, and whatever. How many times is that stated in our regulations already?
That's also Harrisville.
Except
But
that this
we're
is,
doing,
except this is a new section.
as I'm trying to imply that we're acknowledging that going forward in the future, we are going to see increasing use of solar panels.
No.
That's the purpose of why we're writing the regulations.
Right.
And I would like to take into consideration the scenic views, historic properties.
Sure you would.
Yeah, but
So Barbara, did you get that thing about Dave's little comment?
Yes.
Okay, so you can add that to the line, if you would, please, in your,
Can't do it on our scenic
Rewrite?
roads.
after you work, so send it to me.
unless, Dave, you could send it to Joanne in the email so she'd have it.
And 524-2 doesn't even need to be there.
Yeah, right.
That's on the bottom of page 2. The last thing you want to do is say, oh, we're copying Harrisville.
No, that Harrisville is
No, that's
wrong.
taken out.
That word Harrisville is stricken, it's Goffstown
Yeah,
now.
I don't
Yeah, I
think
already
you need the whole thing. I
That
don't
was
think
a-
you
that
need
was
the
a
entire
typograph.
sentence.
Well, you could say the following definitions apply to this section. I would say that because they're just applicable to this section and not to the zoning for this
All right.
section. So take out the rest of it.
Okay, any more comments on the solar wording at this time. Any other discussion from our public speaker about the amendments at this time?
No, I've said enough.
Nobody's concerned about kennels?
Alan, you've never been shy about saying two
No,
lots.
I know
Why
it.
should you stop now?
You've got your chance to speak, so use it or lose it.
No, I think it's just premature
Okay,
and poorly written,
thank you,
very poorly written.
thank you. Okay, anyone else that wants to speak at tonight's public hearing? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing for this evening. Members. So we have received an offer from Barbara to work with Joanne and tweak some of the wording for the next hearing. And David has a comment that he is going to email to Joanne to be added in, so it's worded the way he would like to see it worded for discussion. Anybody have anything else to add at this time?
Do you plan on waiting until the next hearing to vote on the other articles, or?
I didn't
How do you
plan on
handle
anything. I'm letting you lead us here.
Well, you have two choices. You can vote on the other articles and as they are written for the ballot, and they will go on the way they are. And
Don't we have to have public hearing before we can vote on anything?
You just have
We just
it.
did, yeah.
We just had it.
Yeah, nobody wanted to talk about the commercial kennels or,
Why is it called the first public hearing if it's only one public hearing?
Well, if anything gets
I thought there was a
amended,
second public hearing coming up.
like the solar,
Anything that's substantial.
substantial amendments like the solar, that will require a second hearing.
Okay,
So that second hearing will be held on January 13th.
okay.
If there's substantive changes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, we need to talk.
Well, the solar
Right.
will be.
Right.
but-
yeah.
Phil?
Yeah,
Wait a second. Everybody done before Phil starts? Go ahead, Phil.
the question I have is, what was posted for the public hearing? Was it this front page?
Yes. Well, it
Well,
was everything that,
yeah, but was this front page part of the public hearing?
yes.
Well, I guess what Tim said about the second public hearing, the first sentence says, Goffstown Planning Board will hold its first public hearing on a proposed 2022 zoning amendments here. That seems to imply that there is a second public hearing. And if that's part of the public hearing, my only concern is that people that read this may think that they have couldn't make it tonight, they have an opportunity for the second one, because traditionally, we used to always have two public hearings.
So then I would suggest that we have no vote on any of the articles tonight, and we vote on all of them at the same time at the
In
end
fact,
of
we
the...
used to have one hearing in Penarville.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So Phil's comment is taken, and I suggest we wait until, Joanne, I suggest we wait until we have our second public hearing to vote on the rest of the
Okay. That's
items.
fine.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Did you want to talk about the site plan regulations?
What site plan regulations?
The work that we've trying to hire out Will Tanner for.
Yeah, I think you should give a report to the board and to our selectmen's rep about what has transpired and what you were told.
Okay. So we all talked about updating the site plan regulations for a while now, and I've been dealing with Will Tanner to try and get an estimate so that we could, sign the contract and get going with the project. They've been extremely busy, as we all have been, from summer to basically the end of the fall, and just have not had a chance to do that. So I discovered, kind of on my own, that the select board, they were going to be voting, or not voting, but reviewing the encumbrances for the monies from this year on to next year. And in order to do that, you need a contract. So I
Before you go any further, if you're talking about encumbrances, what money were you talking about encumbering for this contract?
So when I spoke with Derek several months ago, when this first came up, I was under the impression that we were going to wait until next year's budget and that the money would be provided or requested. But that's not the case. He said that that would be for the zoning ordinance update, which we did put money in there for that update, and hopefully it's still there. I'm not sure where the budget's at this point.
Let's stay on topic.
But, so anyway, so that money is there, and he said, no, we will have extra money that we can use for the encumbrance for the site plan.
From the administration budget?
No, he basically said from land use, because we have so many openings this year.
Okay.
For several months, so the salary lines are over what we normally would have left at the end. So anyway, so then we, attempted to get something in writing as far as an estimate goes. And when I found out that this was happening that day or that evening, this was Monday, I did contact Will Tanner and told them, I need this right away, and so they provided me with a contract.
With an amount of?
$11,000. And so, and I thought that was reasonable for the work that they would be doing. So I did provide the contract to Derek and Danielle, and I asked, I had a conversation with Danielle on Friday, so she knew it was coming, and I said, can we get this on the list for tonight, which was Monday? And Derek, I guess he did, for some reason, he didn't want to include it. He said, we'll just do it next year, and that we will have money left over in the salary line, again, because we're still understaffed for some people. So that's where we're at right now. So the selectmen are actually voting on the list the 20th of December, so.
And our request was not on that list?
And our request was not included.
So how do we get our request on this
And I
list?
talked to Tim right away, because I wanted the board to know about this.
I talked to Joanne about this subject, and I felt that considering the amount of encumbrances that the large departments in our town put on the select board, I'm sure it's going to be a large, large number. I think an $11,000 request for an encumbrance out of the unused salary line at the town office building is a very small number based on the big picture. And I felt it was unfair, I'll say it right here in front of everybody, I thought it was unfair that we would be pushed aside for not wanting to put it on because it's just another encumbrance that the selectmen would have to look at. So I think that we should have had that on the list, even though the town administrator just decided not to do it.
And in his, to stick up for Derek,
I'm not kicking him.
I think because he was like, well, you're just walking in with this, but to be honest, no one gave me any dates of when this was going before the board, so I had no idea.
Well, and to be fair, this discussion started when I was chair. This discussion has been going on since calendar year 2020.
Yes.
So this is not new news that we wanted money. We had previous discussions about the amount of money and what it was going to come in at, and were we going to need to do bids or be able to go right to some. I mean, this discussion has been going on a long time.
We
so-
actually have money within our own planning budget that we could add to the available funds for the encumbrance. We have some training money that's unused. There's some other
salary
lines that are unused, and we have our own money in our own budget that we could add to whatever was the, starting point, and hopefully the selectmen would consider it at that
The
point.
other reason,
So why can't we ask the select board to add something to the encumbrance list?
We don't know the procedures because we don't know how it works, so we're sort of like, do that.
I just made a note to myself
Because the list.
to ask that question. Can we add something under the
I make a
encumbrance list at
motion
this point?
to have Tim send a letter to the Board of Selectmen requesting that $11,000 be encumbered for site development work as proposed by the planning director.
I'll second it.
And they do have a copy of the contract. I did leave it with them.
So there's a motion been made to authorize the chair to send a letter to the Board of Selectmen requesting this amount of $11,000 be considered on their encumbrance list, made by Barbara, seconded by Karen. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Yes, I do have to add, I am, Hoyle Tanner is my employer, but I am in a different section of the group, and I do not work on this contract.
Well, that's fine.
I thought it was Will Tanner.
Under statute, to encumber, there has to be an enforceable obligation, so we're also requesting that the contract be
Right.
approved.
Yeah.
Which we haven't seen, but that's part of it.
It's very basic, boilerplate. They
Because we
said-
had already gone back, and you and I had gone over language that we had gone back and forth with them on this
I
stuff.
did ask for 4 meetings, that includes meetings with staff, so not all 4 would be with the board, but I wanted to make sure there was enough back and forth.
I want this to happen, but I already see a problem with the finance department. Anything over a certain dollar amount has to get 3 bids.
Well, I did ask about that in the very beginning of the process, and because we contract with Hoyle Tanner as one of our, what's it called,
On-call.
Approved contract?
pre-contracted.
So good, we
We don't
covered that
need-
base.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, I did look into that.
Thank you.
So not only encumber and sign the contract is my motion. If I didn't say and sign
Okay,
the
so the
contract.
motion's been amended. Will you
Yes.
amend your second?
Yes.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Are we missing any members tonight?
No.
No, so Dave, your vote didn't count.
Well, you didn't have to say that.
I heard him say aye, so
So
I
do I
did.
need to abstain?
Excuse me?
Because this is my employer, do I need to abstain?
Only if you have a financial interest in this.
I would.
Okay, I will abstain.
Okay, so
So David's
So then-
vote does
one
count.
abstention.
So you're
So
good
you're
with
There
that?
you go, down.
It wasn't accidentally left in the ballot box or whatever.
If you had chose to recuse yourself, then Dave's vote would
There's
have
even
counted.
more.
All right. So, Joanne, you need to write that letter up so I can sign it, please.
Okay.
Or Patty, just,
Get it done.
needs to take 3 lines, that's it.
So your packets are in front of you for next week's meeting, the 16th. We have the regular board meeting of the month. And the Factory Street project is coming in, as well as a request to build on a Class 6 road. And there's one other thing.
The one down in Pinardole on Larch Street?
The mill building.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
what are they
the driveway.
Larch
He's
Street.
coming
They
in.
want to change.
No, I'm sorry, I take that back. We had him come back to review. We reviewed his application and found that it wasn't completed properly. So we have asked that this get pushed out, and he's going to Florida for 2 months. So he's coming back in February. But there is something else. Did anyone open their packet?
Yeah.
There is something else on there.
On the agenda?
Why is Factory Road doing that?
They had some amendments that they would like to
Right.
run by the board.
They're looking for a request for non-material change status to change things on the site, and that's what the discussion was about, whether material changes or
Gotcha.
non-material.
Cast surety release?
For the solar project.
For the solar project?
What great timing.
For the landscaping.
Things keep coming around in circles.
Not really landscaping.
While they come in, can we ask them about our ordinance?
Yeah, right.
All right. Anybody else have anything for this meeting? Joanne, do you have anything else for us?
Nothing I can think of, no.
Motion to adjourn.
Anybody else from this board have anything for the board tonight? Thank you. Bill made a motion to adjourn,
I'll second it.
seconded by Karen.
But they do keep these. They're not taking over.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstention, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Carol.